Hi guys, welcome to the video. Today I'm going to be showing you my updated editing workflow for stacking images in Zerene Stacker. So to start off with, you want to select the images you want to stack, and to do this I use Lightroom. And the reason I use Lightroom is because it's where I edit my images anyway, and it has a file organization system in it. So as you can see, it's got all my images. I can rate them, I can add colors to them if I want to label them and stuff. Now what I usually do is edit the images first and then export them and stack the images in Zerene Stacker. So I'll show you quickly how I edit an image. And as you can see here, I've already got an edit on it, but I'll reset and just show you exactly how I edit. So when I first start editing, I look at the histogram up here and analyze what's going on. So as you can see here, this is the highlights, but basically this is the darkest points, these are the lightest points. Generally just bring down the highlights like that to get some more detail there. I can bring up the shadows to reveal more detail in the subject. And now it's looking a bit too flat, so all I can do is just bring a little bit of contrast in, around 15 maybe. I usually add a bit of clarity just because it brings out a bit more detail, and it also enhances the whites in the image sometimes. And once I've done a little bit of exposure, I usually jump down to the sharpening. A good trick with sharpening in Lightroom is you can mask where the sharpening is applied to. What this is here, that all the white bits are what is being sharpened and all the black bits is what's not being sharpened, rather than applying the sharpening to the whole image. And by doing this, you're making the subject stand out a bit more. I usually add a value of 60. I feel like that works best with these Olympus files. And then I enable profile corrections and chromatic, removing chromatic aberration. You can also adjust the vibrance and saturation here. Most of the time I'll adjust the vibrance to about 25 maximum. I don't usually go anything over that. And then bring it down to about 5 or 3, just a little bit, just to take down some of the colors. And sometimes I adjust the tone curve, generally just doing like an S curve or something like that, if there's like barely any contrast in the image. But at the moment this image is looking quite contrasty, so I think I'll leave that. Yeah, and that's about it for editing. So what I do then is copy the settings from that image, and then I go to the very first image that's in focus. I've already selected it already for this image, but I'll show you what I do. So I'll zoom in, and as you can see, nothing is in focus. We've almost got that hair in focus. And then if I move forward a few images to this one, as you can see, we now have that hair in focus, and that is the very first part of the subject. And then what I do is scroll down to what I think will be the last image. So I'll scroll down to the last image actually, which is this one. And I could use this image and just be lazy, but I usually zoom in on the furthest part of the subject. So right here, I think it's going to be this foot, or probably the hairs on the back of the spider. And I go back a few images until that's in focus. So right here, I thought this was the last image. And as you can see, there is the very back of the subject in focus with the few hairs. But it's totally up to you. If you want to stack just the face of the subject, or if you want to stack the whole thing, then select those images if you want. It's totally up to you. So once you've got all the frames that you know you're going to include in the stack, you select the very last one that you want to add to the stack. You hold shift and select the very first one. And as you can see there, it's selected all those frames in between. And what you can do then is right click, develop settings, and paste settings. And what that's done there is just applied the edit from that one image to every single image that I'm going to include in my stack. So all the images have the same exposure, same color, and all that stuff. But yeah, then I select all the images I want, right click, export, and I make sure I export them as TIFF files. This is so I have more flexibility with editing, since JPEGs don't have as much flexibility. Just copy these settings that I've got here. So generally, all this is just like where you want to put it. So I put it to my desktop, and then I'll delete it once I've stacked it. Color space, I do sRGB. Depending on what computer you have, you might select a different one. For example, if you're on a Mac, Adobe RGB, you might prefer that. 16-bit is usually better than 8-bit. Image sizing, I don't resize to fit anything, but I do have the resolution as 300 pixels per inch. And then I export. And as you can see, I've already exported these because this is a demonstration, so I'll cancel that and get on to Zerene Stacker. So once you've opened up Zerene Stacker, you're going to go File, add files, and then wherever your files are, select all those images. And what we have here is all those individual images we export from Lightroom on this left bit here. And as you scroll down, it will show you a preview of those images. And what you want to do here is go stack. And there's two modes here. There's align and stack all PMax, which is a different algorithm to DMAP, which is underneath there. And usually I'll try out these two different algorithms and see which one has best results. PMax typically optimizes for sharpening and has worse colors, is what I've usually found out. And PMax also has quite high contrast, whereas DMAP has a more realistic contrast and better colors. However, DMAP, the edges of the subject and overlapping parts don't seem to stack as well. But let's start off with PMax and see how that looks. So usually stacking about 30 images takes around 30 seconds to a minute. So I'll cut to when the image is stacked. So with the PMax, it will just stack it and you won't have to do anything else. But with the DMAP, as you can see here, halfway through the stack, it comes up with set contrast threshold. And what this is basically telling you to let the algorithm know what is in focus and what's not in focus. So the black parts of the image on the right are out of focus. So as I slide it, it will adjust that. And anything else that's an actual image is what's in focus. So what you want to do is crank this as much as you can without having the black parts on the subject. So 52.8 looks good. And all you gotta do is click OK and it will finish the rest of the stack. So as you can see on the right, it's stacking each frame individually there. And I'll cut to when both of the stacks are done. Alright, so both stacks are done. And as I said earlier, you've got all your image files here. As you can see, input files, it says there. And then down here, it says output files. So once you've done some stacks, your output files will be down here. And because I've done both the PMax and DMAP, I have two output images. Now, as you can see, DMAP looks quite clean. The colors are quite nice. And then PMax is a little bit more contrasty and a little bit grainier. Now, for me personally, I prefer the look of DMAP. And then I like to merge a bit of PMax into the DMAP output file. That sounds a bit complicated, but I will show you that right now. And if you go on the DMAP, as you can see, bits are not stacked properly on overlapping parts. As you can see, there's a little bit there. And if you go on the PMax, it's stacked proper nicely. You can see that hair there. All you got to do to retouch this is select the base layer which you want. So for me, I really like the DMAP one, but I really like some parts of the PMax. So I'm going to have the DMAP as my base layer and click Edit, Start Retouch. So what you can do here is select individual frames and stack parts from those frames into your image, which is what I used to do. And then I realized you can actually just stack an output image onto another output image. So on the left is showing me a preview of what I'm going to be painting into my final image, which is on the right. So if I hold Alt on my keyboard, it will show me a preview of that file on the left. So when I zoom in on a part that needs fixing, like this bit here, I can hold Alt and see that preview image on the left appear on the right. And then I can paint over those areas that need retouching. So as you can see, I've just fixed that little bit there. So right here is a good example. There's obviously quite a few hairs that are already there and stacked on the DMAP file. But on the PMax, you can see it's done a much better job at revealing that detail and stacking all those hairs. And all you want to do is just brush over like that. And you can do this for as long as you want. There's no like limit on what you should be stacking and how you should be retouching and stuff. It's just personal preference. Now I could be here all day because I'm quite OCD and stuff, but I've tried to limit myself and just retouch things that actually need retouching. And for this image, it's actually quite good already as the DMAP. But as you can see here, there is some nice details that, you know, I'd like to reveal. Like in between this leg, it's got a lot of hairs I want to reveal. This hair here, this hair with the background. I'm hiding those imperfections that show that it's a stacked image. So what I want to talk about now is if both your DMAP and PMax have some parts of the image where they haven't worked. So for example, this spider web here, on both the DMAP and the PMax, they haven't stacked very well. As you can see on the PMax, it's stacked every single frame and just has included it for some reason. Whereas the DMAP has included less frames and it looks a bit neater, but it has all this blurry mess here. So to fix that, you can go on individual frames. So this is going to be a lot more tedious. And generally what you want to do is stack the background image first. So for example, I'm just going to do this bit here. I'm just going to do that little bit of background. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's not a main part of the image. So like that. Just going to do a quick example. So I've got rid of that big bit of spiderweb there by painting the very back image onto that output image there. And then you want to find the image where the spiderweb is in focus. So this one looks perfect. It looks like everything is in focus. And it's only spiderweb, so it's not a key part of the image. It's just a little added detail really, as you can see. And then all you want to do is just paint that in. Now what I like to do for details like this is go on to pixels. Now I think you only have these brushes if you have a certain license for Zerene Stacker, but the general brush works perfectly fine as well. I've just found this one, paints in what's in focus and somehow ignores the blurry background a bit better. So as you can see, that's doing a pretty good job. As you can see, it's got like half opacity, it's left a bit of that. So that's why it's quite good for going over details like this. But if you want to get it all clean, the normal brush will do that perfectly like that. I might just use the normal brush for this actually. I think it can get the job done quicker. Yeah, here's a before and after. So we have the PMax and the DMAP. So the DMAP is what I actually started with. So as you can see, you went from the image on the left to the image on the right. So it's a bit neater, not perfect, but if you zoom out at the whole image, you're not really going to notice it. But yeah, that's how you stack the image. So once you're done, you go edit, commit retouching, and then you can save your project if you want to come back later and fix it later on. Or if you're done now, you can go file, save output images, and then file format as a TIFF, 16 bits, RGB. And there's also retain extended dynamic range, which I've played around with a bit for a few months, and I've preferred the look when I don't have that ticked. So click save image and save it wherever you want. I've got a folder on my desktop where I organize all my stacks, so you can name it whatever you want. I'm going to call this test just for the purpose of this video. And then there you go. So yeah, if you want to go back into retouching, all you got to do is just go edit, start retouching again. And it makes another output image on the bottom left, as you can see. And once you've got your image open in Photoshop, what I usually do is double click on here to unlock the layer. And then I duplicate the layer. What I start out by doing is just checking the exposure. So I go on levels, on adjustments here, and that makes a layer there. And the good thing about making layers is that you can come back and adjust it whenever you want, rather than applying it to the image. And then when you find out you don't like it, you have to go back, and you can only go back a certain amount of times. And then what do you do then? So right here, actually, the exposure looks perfect. Sometimes if there's a gap on the right, I'll move this thing over to reach the white. But right now, the image looks fine. But if I zoom in, I can actually brighten up those eyes on the subject. So technically this is overexposed, but this is accounting for the whole image, not the small bits in the image. So I've just brightened it up to what I feel like the eyes should be brightened to. I can go on the layer here, the mask I mean, and press B to bring up the brush. I'm actually going to invert it as well. So as you can see there, it's took away that brightness I added. And I'm going to paint in the bits that I want. Got my brush on 100%. I'm just going to paint the eyes and bits of the mouth and hands down here, just to bring a bit more attention to the main part of the subject. As you can see, that's brightened up the face a bit there. And you can do stuff like removing bits from the image. So if I go on my actual image layer, usually I'll do the, what's it called? Healing brush tool. And for example, if I want to remove this bit of mess here, I can stamp a bit over here and then paint over like that. As you can see, it's included a bit of spider web, so I'll just make a smaller brush and remove that like that. This is a good way of removing some bits of blur by the edge of legs and stuff, or spiderweb, for example. This little bit of spiderweb I adjusted earlier, there's actually still a little bit of blur. If you grab a bit from the side, so from here, make your brush small and then paint just to the side of it. If you get too close, it will do this. It will start going like that, so gotta make sure not to touch it. A better example will probably be like over here. This is a really blurry part. So grab a bit from the side and then start painting really close to it. And as you can see, that's just removed that blur from the background where the stacking software hasn't worked very well. To clean up the background, I make a new layer and I bring my brush up and hold Alt to bring up this little eyedropper, and then I select a color which I want to paint over the background. So I'm going to select white, this bit of white, and then make my brush bigger, make sure it's on 0 hardness, bring it down to 50 opacity, and then just paint over any distracting bits like that. And I don't want to go too overboard, so that should do really. And that might be too much. If you think it's too much, you can actually just come onto the layer at the bottom right and bring down the opacity of the whole layer. So I feel like that's good. That's still got the original detail in the background, but it's just made it a bit less noticeable. But generally those are all the adjustments I do. So once I've done that, I will select all the layers apart from the bottom one and merge them. Alternatively, if you want to keep the layers, you can click Control, Shift, Alt and E, I think it is, and that merges, I think that merges them all, but I don't usually do that. I usually just do that. And then I duplicate that layer and do a bit of sharpening. So I go onto Filter, Other, High Pass, and I do between 1 and 2. So for this image, it looks quite sharp already. And the goal is to get this image just barely visible. So it might be hard to tell on the video, but 1.5 looks good. And as you can see, it's all gray. So you go on to blend modes, go on overlay. And if I zoom in and toggle the layer on and off, you can see that's added sharpening. It might be hard to tell on the video, but it has added sharpening. And that's how I sharpen images in Photoshop. And if you want to just apply that to the subject, make a mask, and you can invert that mask, which will remove all the sharpening. And then you just paint where you want the sharpening to be applied to with a white brush, just like that. There we go, sharpening's applied. And then you can just merge that layer with the layer below. Once I've made all my final adjustments, I copy the image by doing Control A, Control C, Control N to make a new layer, not a new layer, a new document. Click Create and then paste it. And this is just to make a copy, so in case I do too many adjustments and then I'm screwed. And what I'm doing here is just cropping the image. So as you can see, the crop at the moment, because of how I shot it, I have to turn my head to actually see it. So generally I want my image to look like this, so it's just face on, you know, normal. And you might be thinking, oh yeah, the edges of the frame have got PNGs in the background. That, you know, there's no image in the background. And I'll show you how you sort that out. So just crop however you like. I quite like this crop, so I'm going to click Done. And then if I click and hold Control, brings up this like square at the bottom when I hover over this. Click on the frame, and as you can see, it's selected the image. So I'll click Control Shift I to invert that, and it's selecting these PNG bits. And just to be sure, I'm going to go select, modify, expand by 10 pixels. And as you can see now, it's selected just a little bit over the image. So to do content aware fill, we go Shift F5 and content aware, and then OK. And depending on the image, it could do a really good job or it could do a bad job. As you can see here, it's yeah, done a pretty bad job. It's really blurry there. There's a bit of leg for some reason. If it's a real mess, like I think this is quite a bit of a mess, so I'm going to back out to where I had the selection by hitting Control Z, and then I'm going to go use the selection tool, so like this, right click and then generative fill, which is a new feature in Photoshop, which is like content aware fill, but it's a bit smarter. And just click generate, you don't have to type anything in there. And as you can see, the AI generative fill has done a much better job, much cleaner that is. And you have 3 versions to select from, so that's the first one, that's the second one, third one. The first and second one are my favorites, I think. Second one looks quite clean over here, so I might go with that one. Once you're happy with that, just merge it with your layer below. And then what I do then is save this. So I'll click Ctrl S and just save that as a TIFF into the folder. And you can replace the original TIFF you had earlier, or you can make a copy or whatever. I'm just going to replace it. And then generally I would go for slower saves and smaller files, and then just save that to wherever I desire. And I'm also going to save a JPEG as well. To save, you go File, Export, Export As, and there's also a shortcut, so Alt, Shift, Control W, and then put it up to 7 for the quality. And then all these settings I keep defaulted, so but make sure Embed Color Profile is on if you don't want your color profile to change. And then export, and yeah, I'm just going to call it test. I accidentally saved one from earlier, so I'm just going to put test 1. And if I change my mind and want to do a different crop, I'm just going to open the TIFF file I saved earlier, because that's got all the detail in there. And I'm going to make a crop and then save that as a JPEG. So I'll put the image up that I just edited now for this test up on screen, but I'll spend some time off camera making fine adjustments and editing it properly. And then I'll put that up on screen too. But yeah, that is my whole Zerene Stacker editing, stacking workflow, whatever you call it. Hopefully I explained it well, but if you have any questions, leave a comment and I'll be sure to reply. But with all that said and done, I'm going to call today's video here. So make sure to leave a like, subscribe, share, comment, all that stuff. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.